Dr. G and Andy, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing, guys?
Excellent.
Good, Josh.
So for new listeners here, I just want to introduce both of you quick, and then we're going to dive into a super interesting topic. Dr. G is a renowned board-certified chiropractic neurologist dedicated to holistic health. He is one of America's leading experts in lifelong optimized living, having trained thousands of clients and practitioners within his training program, and he has over 800,000 Instagram followers. Andrew Cieply is a nutrition expert and head coach at Co-Movement Gym with over 12 years experience training clients. Today's topic, we are going to sort of break down our thoughts on why top Olympic athletes use baking soda to boost performance. This was sent to me by a friend, and I found it fascinating. I had read a little bit on it in the past, never really dove into it. So I sent it to both of you, the experts here. And so I want to hear your thoughts on that. The Co-Movement Gym podcast is sponsored by Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. Mention this podcast or use the promo code in the episode description for a nice discount on us. So let's start off with Andy. What's the first thing that come to mind with athletes using the supplement?
Well, if you've been in endurance sports for a while, like athletes have used baking soda, sodium bicarbonate for a long time. Endurance sports athletes, probably going back to like the 80s or so. And the idea behind it is because it's a base, you're trying to buffer the buildup of acid in your muscles. Acid is something that ends up limiting our performance in endurance sports, especially over the short distances, like say an 800 meter or 1500 meter race, something like that. So the idea behind taking baking soda was to neutralize that acid and hopefully be able to run longer with higher levels of lactate in the blood. The problem behind it was always that it caused GI discomfort. People, it's always a gamble taking baking soda. You could take it and improve your performance by maybe 1% or 2%, but then you could also end up puking at mile 2 of your race. So there's, some people have tried it. Some people swear by it. A lot of people didn't like it. And then you sent us an article about a new form of sodium bicarbonate delivery, basically a new product. And that's really, really interesting. So we'll probably end up talking about that today. I never used sodium bicarbonate as an endurance athlete. I just didn't want to deal with the potential GI upset, and the benefits didn't seem super significant for someone like me.
Yeah, Dr. G, where's your mind going with this?
Yeah, no, it's the whole idea is to use a base to buffer the hydrogen ions produced in the muscle. So one of the reasons why we give out, right, is, we used to say lactic acid buildup or lactate buildup, but really it's the hydrogen ions that are produced, and that makes it painful and more difficult for the muscle to perform. So if you make the blood just a little bit more basic, well, then those hydrogen ions can be drawn away from the muscle into the bloodstream to be neutralized, and then the muscle could perform longer. I don't have any personal experience with this, and it's typically, especially the article was from Outside Magazine that you sent over. So, I really like, Men's Health, Outside Magazine. All of these are, kind of the zeitgeist of what's going on, and, the journalists kind of have their fingers on the pulse of what athletes are doing and what people are doing. So I did a little bit of research into it, and, at best, the performance enhancement is probably, I think, according to some of the research that I read, 1 to 3% improvement in performance for events that take 1 to 7 minutes. And, there's some fairly good research there, but when I think about it for us, or even for clients or people in poor metabolic health, I just don't see any benefit whatsoever, unless you're, I don't know, just want to get super, aggressive on your pickleball game on the weekend and perform, like a just 3% better in a 7-minute stretch. I can't imagine why anyone would use it, but it really brought the conversation more to hydrogen ions or lactate buildup results in fatigue and poor performance or declining performance more rapidly. What do we know about that? How does your body buffer it without sodium bicarbonate? And by the way, this company, Morten or something.
Yeah, not sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, Maurten is the name of the company. A whole box of Arm & Hammer baking soda is $7.
Yeah.
4 doses of this stuff is $65.
Yeah.
So I guess it's worth it in the Olympics, to have a 1% edge. I don't see. I mean, do you guys see any other application for this?
No, not at all. I think it is really just for those top level performers that, 1% could be the difference between a gold and a silver medal. And that's why you see those guys using this a lot. In fact, they're using that Morton product quite a bit now. But for the recreational athlete or someone like us, I don't see any purpose to it at all. And then there's the downsides of GI discomfort that I talked about. I want to say something. You'd mentioned how the journalists like Outside and Men's Health have their finger on the pulse. The article that you sent us, Josh, I noticed the author was Alex Hutchinson. He wrote a book called Endure, which is a really fascinating book about basically just endurance sports and how things have changed, super shoes, the use of things like baking soda and a lot of other stuff about endurance sports. Really, really fascinating. If you can listen to a podcast by him or something, you'd really enjoy it. So I was glad to see that he wrote that article. He really does. He was a phenomenal runner himself. And I think he even went to the Olympics. But let's see, something else I wanted to say.
Andy, is this the guy who did a video on like a TED Talk once where he looked at all of the step function improvements in performance over the last century in sports like track and field and swimming? And that's one of the coolest TED Talks I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yep.
It was really...
He's a really great guy and a good speaker.
Yes. Yeah. So he would, he said that because this is the guy who tried to use exercise science or whatever to correct for, the shoes that Jesse Owens was wearing, the fact that he was running on a cinder track, all of the things that would, slow the person down. And he would create this blip system where, you would kind of time the 100 yards that Usain Bolt, set the record at, and then Jesse Owens clearly comes in last place. But when he corrects for all of the changes in the track itself, the material the track is made out of, the shoe material, etc., Jesse Owens is really like just
right there with him,
fraction of a second behind Usain Bolt. And when we think about nutrition, when we think about training, when we think about how much the human body has improved, I think in that same in that same talk, he said the improvements in the 100-yard dash from the ancient Olympics to now, they estimate is less than a second. Now, in a 100-yard dash, a second is a long time.
10% improvement, maybe.
Right. But 10% in 4,000 years, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess
I was going to say one thing. One thing you made me think of, Dr. G, when you were talking about the research on baking soda being beneficial mostly in that 1 to 7 minute range, 400 meter, 800 meter, mile, that kind of thing. One of the things about this Morton product is that it delivers the baking soda in this hydrogel, which I don't know, keeps, maybe it's a slow release kind of thing or something, but it keeps the levels of bicarbonate elevated for a really, really long period of time, something like 12 hours or something. And they did some studies on cyclists and maybe another study too on runners, but definitely a study on cyclists going for 1 hour time trials. And they were noticing an improvement throughout the entire thing, all the way up to an hour. So now a lot of like Josh Cieply guy, the 10K and 5K world record holder, he uses this stuff in like 10K races and thinks that he sees a huge improvement. So it's kind of an interesting product that they've developed with this microencapsulated sodium bicarbonate in this hydrogel, which supposedly gives you more of a slow release and bypasses the stomach discomfort.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing, right? So you're not going to have the gastrointestinal distress. You
Right.
actually can probably take more. And it was interesting because in something that I read, yes, I don't know if it's released more slowly, but it's not released in the stomach. It's released
Right.
after the stomach. So it actually gets into the bloodstream faster
Mhm.
somehow. I'm not sure of the mechanism. Maybe more of it gets into the bloodstream than if it had to go through the stomach. Maybe there's a lot more buffering going on in the stomach because the stomach is an acid environment. So if you were to take straight baking soda, the stomach would buffer so much of it before it got into your bloodstream. Whereas with the hydrogel, it's protected from the stomach acid. It gets into the small intestines where there's not stomach acid. And therefore, you can get more of it into your bloodstream and have less of it to cause any kind of, distress.
Yeah. That kind of begged the question to me, like, why hasn't some company tried to do, maybe they have, just enteric coated sodium bicarbonate capsules? Isn't enteric coating supposed to just go through the stomach and then pass into the intestine where it's dissolved or whatever? It seems like it
Yeah,
would do almost the same thing
I,
for a
I,
lot
I think,
cheaper.
yeah, well, no, I think that, that's the idea behind it. And again, because it's a base, I'm sure there's all kinds of interactions between what you put into a capsule and the capsule itself. So again, I'm not too sure of the physics of that, but again, $65 for 4 doses. Either the profit margin is massive, or it really is that expensive to make, or both.
Yeah, I was running the calculation. I can see how it would cause stomach issues. It was zero point 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for someone my size, it was like 23 grams of baking soda, which I don't know how many tablespoons. I don't know what the conversion is, but it sounds like a lot.
Yeah,
you know?
that's a good amount.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
probably like 4 or 5 tablespoons or
That's what I
teaspoons.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Dr. G, when you had asked, like, would we try that? I think, that 1 to 3% improvement, I think it could be found in so many other areas for non-professionals like us. And just better structured training, tougher mental resilience. I think this better structured training is huge. Like Andy's been helping me, with some lactate threshold and VO2 structure, to dial it in even farther. And I'm seeing huge improvements. And it's just tweaks, like little tweaks. And so, like, for the listener that's considering doing, taking baking soda for the 1 to 3%, I would do a hard look into all the other stuff. Like, is your training correct? Is your recovery correct? Is your nutrition correct? Is your sleep correct? Is your strength training correct? And mobility? Like, there's so many things that can contribute to not only the 1 to 3% increase, but like 5, 10, 15% if you're doing something major incorrect. Like, we're referencing the 1 to 3% improvement in athletes that are at the top. They're the best in the world, and really all things are perfect nearly all the time as far as training outcomes. And so, the 1 to 3% is a huge difference for them. But for the average 5K runner that wants to knock off a minute or two, I would not recommend supplementing baking soda.
Yeah, it's the same. We always say it, you got to get the basics first. I mean, do your training and your sleeping, your
Mhm.
eating, all that stuff. Then you can
Yeah.
look at maybe something that'll help you with that little 1%. But there's so much left on the table by a lot of people by just not training properly or not eating properly. That's the stuff to get first. Those are the big levers.
Native Path has been a podcast sponsor of ours since day one. And it's because our clients feel amazing using their supplements. While a lot of products on the market today contain useless fillers and incorrect dosages, Native Path holds to a higher standard. Native Path's ingredients are sourced from only the highest quality, properly combined nutrients, all while being offered at competitive prices. Use code COMO15, that's COMO15 at checkout, and receive 15% off each order. Lombardi Chiropractic has been Co-Movement's trusted chiropractor for the last 14 years. They have worked with hundreds of our clients, and I can confidently say they have the most knowledgeable and holistic approach to care that I have ever seen. Whether you suffer from migraines, low energy, nagging pain, or just simply want to improve your overall health, I highly recommend contacting the team at Lombardi Chiropractic. Mention the Co-Movement Gym podcast and receive 50% off your initial consultation and x-rays. Here at Co-Movement, we put a lot of energy into helping you become happy, healthy, and strong. But we're not the only ones needing a good workout. That's why a dog's day out is the best place in Central New York for your pet to spend their day. Your dog will be as happy and healthy as you when you let them run, play, and socialize instead of just sitting on the couch waiting for you to come home. Give your dog the active day out that they deserve. Mention this podcast and get a free day of doggy daycare at a dog's day out. Yeah.
Why don't we just go through how the body would otherwise, without any exogenous supplement that would try to absorb those hydrogen ions, what would your body do, especially if you're training? And the answer to that is, when we went to school and studied physiology, and I believe things really haven't changed. If you go to medical school, you learn that lactate is just a waste product of muscle physiology. And, what is now absolutely clear is that lactate production. So if you can imagine, you take a sugar molecule and you quickly produce ATP or energy from it. One of the byproducts of that is lactate. And again, considered a waste product, produces hydrogen ions, gives us the fatigue. Well, it turns out that lactate in an efficient muscle will be recycled to be used for energy in the mitochondria. So it will be oxidized, and therefore that hydrogen ion will be absorbed by the mitochondria to be used in that process. And athletes can maintain, so let's just say, if you put me, if you wanted to do a functional threshold test on me, on a bike, I could probably do, 170 watts, for an hour on a FTP test. Because if I tried to do more than that, the amount of lactate that I would go well above my lactate threshold, I would get very uncomfortable fatigue and I would stop. But a trained athlete, could probably, let's just say, do 400 watts, which is incredible. But that's because they're producing lactate and recycling it to be metabolized by their muscle for energy. Now, not only is it metabolized by the muscle, it's sent back to the liver to be converted into glucose. And so there's a couple of different pathways there. But if we could just imagine, what does this mean for the average 5K runner and for myself, being in my mid-50s and just trying to be healthier and more fit? Well, the more zone 2 training that I do, the more I train the mitochondria in my type 1 fibers, those fibers that are loaded with mitochondria. If I'm doing a powerful exercise that produces a lot of lactate in, let's say, my pec muscles or my biceps, or the more power muscles that do not have a lot of mitochondria, the more type 2 fibers, the lactate from there will locally just leave the muscle and be absorbed by the type 1 fibers that are supporting that function. So if you could imagine, if I'm doing something like throwing a baseball, well, that's not, all right, let's say I'm a football player and I'm throwing, I'm a quarterback, I'm throwing the football, and I have a lot of power and use of my muscles that are used to throw the football. The lactate from those muscles are going to then be absorbed by the muscles giving stability to my shoulder that are behind me, right? So our type 1 and type 2 system, they're always working with each other. They're not necessarily one or the other, right? So a really efficient person with mitochondrial density can produce more lactate and metabolize it, so there's less hydrogen ion, which is exactly what you're trying to do with the bicarbonate, with the baking soda, and the objective there is to just make that system more efficient. So if you're going to train zone 2, train that energy system, so that the lactate you can produce more and more and more of it at higher and higher intensities, and still be able to do it for an hour, right? Still be able to have that endurance. So that's the mechanism. And the answer is, for most people, is going to be zone 2, zone 2, zone 2, with, interspersed with a lot of explosive lactate producing activities, whether it be weightlifting or whatever your rock climbing or whatever your choice is. Andy, I know you're an avid rock climber, and I can't help but imagine that your endurance work that you do on your treadmill and out running just gives you the ability to, when I go rock climbing, at the rock climbing gym with my daughter, the speed at which I fatigue is just, it's unreal. And you guys go out there and you just dance up the rock for hours. And I believe that that's the mechanism.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that difference. The more that I've done endurance training, the better my sport climbing gets, which is the endurance based form of climbing, where you're trying to climb, a 100-foot cliff or something. And yeah, you do feel the accumulation of acid in your forearms very quickly in rock climbing, and an insane blood flow pump as well. But yeah, I've noticed that the endurance work that I do actually does improve my rock climbing, which is the endurance component anyway, which is really interesting. You wouldn't think of running as being great training for rock climbing intuitively, but it turns out that, yeah, when you're working zone 2 a lot, it benefits your whole body in every activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
pretty cool.
I want to add to that too, just from like a real world component with like whether it's manual labor or just day-to-day function and energy. This past year, I've dialed in my zone 2 and I've taken it seriously every single week. And I have seen a huge improvement in everything. Just daily energy, working with clients and just be better at work. Like, and I don't know, again, I don't know the science behind it. It sounds like my mitochondria is maybe more efficient, but like, it's definitely improved everything from like weightlifting endurance to, biking, rucking, swimming. Like I was telling Andy before the call, I took the whole summer off from swimming with the exception of like a few triathlons, but I didn't train swimming at all. Just, I was busy doing other training and focus areas. I went back and I swam 2 weeks ago. I did 15 200 intervals on a 215 repeat timer. Not a hard workout, but hard enough to where if you're out of swimming shape, that'll crush you. And it was literally easy. And why is that? I just think it's because I spent a lot of time doing zone 2 running. I was doing heavier rucking. I was doing a lot of hill work on my bike. And I just think that something converted to that, just like you were mentioning it, rock climbing, Andy. So there's just so much benefit to really getting that zone dialed in and training it frequently.
Yeah. We were talking about training, and that was one of the thoughts I had with this whole sodium bicarbonate thing, is the purpose of training is to get your body better at doing these things, that the whole mechanism that Steve described about how our body buffers and recycles lactate, on its own, buffers acid and recycles lactate. You want to get better at doing that. I don't want to take baking soda during training and have the baking soda do the work of buffering acid. I want my body to have to do that work and upregulate all of the mechanisms that actually do that naturally. I mean, that's the whole purpose of training. That was kind of one thing I thought. Like, and I know that the athletes who use baking soda typically use it just during races. I doubt that they would ever use it during training. That wouldn't make any sense based on what I just said, But yeah, certainly I wouldn't use it for training for that purpose. I want to get my body better at doing everything that Steve described.
Yeah, for sure. One thing here I want to mention also, but just a quick correction. I said 200s on 215, just for people geeking out to that. They were hundreds on 215. So I'm not an Olympic swimmer. So because I know I'll get an email or a text on that. So the thing I wanted to ask you guys on was that TED Talk you were mentioning with improvement with athletes over time, but a lot of it due to like track surface and shoes and stuff. In your opinion, knowing just like our training knowledge, our food knowledge, our supplement knowledge, like all of this is so much more now than it was, say, 100 years ago. Do you think that the human body has really kept itself as far as physical potential goes if you take out the future of shoes and some of these outlying mechanisms? Do you think that we've sort of seen the end of that run there as far as big improvements go?
I feel like it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I think we've eked out about as much improvement as we can naturally, unless like some sort of genetic, modifications start coming along or something, that kind of medical technology. But I think it's kind of like an asymptote. I think we're just getting closer and closer to a limit, and we'll probably continue to improve forever, like just the way that a limit continues to, approach a certain number. But I think there probably is a limit. But there's always going to be like the random super athlete, genetic freak, the Usain Bolt or whoever that come along and break a previously thought unbreakable world record or something. So I think we'll continue to see improvements. There's going to be far more incremental in the future.
I think,
well, actually, I'll say though, they probably won't be very incremental if we continue to develop things like super shoes and things like that.
Yeah.
That's been the main reason for a lot of the world records that we've seen recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in that same presentation, he talks about how there's a certain way in which we measure the ability to perform in cycling. I can't remember exactly what it was, but apparently that was done in like 1972. So if you wanted to try to break that record, and again, I think it's a velodrome. I'm not sure exactly what the record is, but if you're a cyclist and you want to break that record, you have to get on a bicycle that they have. That is the technology from 1972.
Yeah.
And that's how you would, be able to train that. And, another thing he mentions is the step function changes in swimming came from obviously changing the kind of shorts we wear and then having gutters in the swimming pool. Because when you're swimming and there's no gutters,
yep,
the current comes back and gives you resistance. Whereas if there's gutters, the water spills over and there is no resistance. So there's no way that you could measure the performance of somebody from prior to the gutters to now, right? So there's so many of these step function changes, like you said, but from an evolutionary standpoint, we're not changing. 4,000 years is not enough time to see 3,000 years or whatever is not enough time to see changes in our genetics from an evolutionary standpoint. At least I don't believe so. But if evolution is going to favor anything moving forward, it's going to be brain power, not body power.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and the people with the greater brain power and less physical prowess are more likely to have children and be successful, we'll probably see a decline, not an increase, and not an improvement. Like, during the hunter-gatherer days, we were, the survivors were the athletically gifted. And of course, the ones with the bigger brains, right? The ones that could, understand how to take down a woolly mammoth. But yeah, I would say that we're not going to see any change in our physical ability, in
athletic
the
performance is no longer necessary for survival.
Yeah.
Modern.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be like AI prompting, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
On another just random topic, I guess, just to sort of finish up, did you guys see, I think it was the Appalachian Trail? Was it the record there by Tara Bauer?
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it was.
Yeah, she smashed it.
Yeah, she smashed.
I don't know who it was, but I saw that the woman really did a number on that record, the FKT.
Yeah, it was Tara. I think it was Tara Dower or Bauer. But it was like 40 days and some, 19 hours or something. It was. She said in the article said it was 17 hours a day of running / walking. And then she was averaging, I think, 54 miles a day for 40 days. And so I thought that was pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That's a really good point because, Josh, it goes to the whole 4-minute mile thing, right?
Yeah.
What barriers are going to be smashed that are psychological barriers?
Yeah.
What we believe the human body can and can't do. I mean, in that presentation that we were talking about from the author, and again, what is the name of that author?
Alex Hutchinson.
Yeah, in that presentation, he definitely talks about, whiskey was considered a performance-enhancing drug in like 1910, right? So, this is, we can talk about supplements and food and diet and nutrition, but the truth is when you're 21 years old and you're just genetically gifted, you can literally poison yourself with whiskey and tell yourself you're performing better. One of the greatest stories I ever heard was the story of Amy Winters. Are you familiar with that name?
I don't think so.
I believe that's her name. This is a fascinating story that unfolded in the last couple of decades. Amy was a rambunctious kid in Pennsylvania, getting into trouble, the classic ADHD girl. And she was like in high school and failing and getting into trouble. And somebody saw her just running for the sake of running. Like, she didn't run. She just was a runner, right? And somebody said, hey, you should join the track team or so she ran a 5K. Like that weekend, she's like, oh, somebody said I'm a good runner. I might as well join this race in my town. And she won it. It was her first, like, she never did anything. And she did that, I guess, as a junior or a senior in high school. So somebody saw her and then said, hey, maybe you should go walk on she went to a junior college, a community college, and walked on to the track and then signed up for a marathon. And like, it was her first marathon. She didn't even train for it. All she did was run like these little 5Ks. And I'm butchering the story. I'm sure she could tell it far better, but the spirit of it is pretty clear. Yeah. So she smashes the record for female in Pennsylvania, winning, running a marathon, her first marathon. So she's clearly gifted, but also now she's college age. She's having fun. She buys a motorcycle. She's hanging out with her friends. Next thing you know, she gets into a motorcycle accident and smashes up her foot. But she knows she's a gifted runner. So she goes through all these surgeries to repair her foot. And she's trying to run. And it's just not really working for her. And so she was scheduled to have an amputation of her foot. That's how bad the injury was. But she decided, since she's going to get the surgery, she might as well run a marathon with the bad foot and just see how well she does. I think she won the marathon, but then got her foot amputated poorly by some, rural Pennsylvania orthopedic surgeon, because she didn't have health insurance. Like, she didn't know any better, right? And so she gets a prosthetic, and then she starts training again. And she qualified for the Boston Marathon as an able-bodied runner.
Wow.
And she has this prosthetic on her leg, and she's at the Boston Marathon, and people are like drinking water in those little waxy paper cups, and all those paper cups are all over the place. She slips, and because of the poor design and the poor amputation, her, for lack of a better term, her stub goes through, and she's damaged, right? She's injured. She runs the marathon anyway. Didn't win. Because if she would have won that marathon, she would have qualified for the Olympics as an able-bodied runner.
Oh, God.
So she gets this injury. Her foot goes through her prosthetic. She's bleeding. She runs the marathon. She did, I think, fantastic. Just not enough to qualify for the Olympic team. And it's this endless story. So now I'm going to fast forward, and this kind of stuff keeps happening to her, and she won't stop running. She just won't stop running. She starts doing ultra marathons. She does the what is that one in Death Valley?
Badwater?
Yeah. She won that. She won that with a prosthetic. And so now, again, fast forward, she's in her she does the Barkley Challenge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she does the Barkley Challenge. She didn't win. She didn't win the Barkley Challenge, but her story is so incredible because she had multiple spinal surgeries. She broke her other foot. Nothing could stop this woman from running and winning and running and winning. It's such an amazing story because how many times do you run into people who are like, yeah, I got that herniated disc, or I got this ankle in. She had, can you just imagine what this woman has gone through and her ability? So it's purely a psychological game, and again, I'm butchering the story. I encourage anyone to look up Amy Winter, I think her name is, or Winters, endurance athlete, Barkley Challenge. What was the name of the race you were mentioning in
Badwater
Badwater?
in Death Valley.
Just an incredible story. She has an incredible story about, her, when she was severely depressed when this thing happened at the Boston Marathon. And John Cena, I think the guy who started the Spartan Race Company, the Spartan Company, he was hosting like his elite team to go on this hike somewhere in Asia. And, these events were always like a surprise. So he flew her out there and asked her to join them in this endurance event. So the endurance event was to do this crazy hike over a period of 2 weeks while carrying kettlebells or something crazy. And the whole point was to get this elite group to help each other get through this event. And everybody just basically stated that when people couldn't go any longer, she would carry their kettlebell and her own to help them along. It's just an incredible, crazy story. It's an amazing story. But it goes to the psychology of performance and what we're capable of. So, yeah, I have to revisit that story. I'd like to be able to tell it better. I'm going
I am really fascinated by sports psychology. And I think, Josh, to your question of like, are athletes going to continue to get better? I think that's actually one of the biggest areas where improvements can be made. Yes. So in his book, Endure, Alex talks about the psychological component of performance a lot. And he talks about his own experience where he used to be a mile runner, might have been in college, and he was always trying to get under a certain time, but he never could. He was always like hitting the same, I don't remember how fast he was running the mile. Maybe he was trying to do a sub 4 minute mile and he was always getting like 4:01 or something like that. But then in one race, he went out and he wasn't feeling particularly great that day, but the race started and he had one of his teammates reading him splits every 400 meters, like they do in track. And when he got his 400 meter split, he's like, oh, wow, I kind of did that one like, geez, almost 2 seconds too fast. Like, I'm going to crash and burn, but I actually feel really good. I don't know. I'll just keep going. And then when he got his 800 meter split, again, he was now like, it was another like 4 seconds faster than he'd ever been to 800 meters. And he's like, somehow I still feel kind of okay. And then he got his, 1200 meter split and same thing. And he's like, oh my God, like, I don't know how I feel this good when I'm going this fast. And he ended up breaking his PR in the mile, which was like a wall he'd been up against forever, by something like, I think he broke it by like 6, 7, 8 seconds, something like that. It was a massive improvement. And then afterwards, he found out that his teammate had been reading him the wrong splits. He'd been running the beginning of the race the same pace that he always did. But because he started getting so much kind of positive encouragement, like, wow, I'm feeling really good and I'm going so fast, this might end up being a record. He ended up running like the last 400 or the last 800 way faster than he ever did before. And he smashed his PR by, in the mile to be your PR by, I don't remember what it was, 6, 7, 8 seconds, whatever he did was enormous. And it all came from this psychological boost of thinking he was doing better than he was.
Yeah.
Because his teammate just read the wrong splits to him.
Wow. Yeah, what an area we can go into, in the future, I guess, with athletics is that side, the psychology piece. My niece, Andy, we just visited Bucknell. She's on the crew team. Mm-hmm. And they all have their own sports psychologists. Each kid has access to, and they work with them. It's really, really fascinating how much that particular school focuses on the mental component also. Because I'm assuming, they understand this stuff like what we're mentioning. But there's probably a lot. That's a really awesome story, both of those. Yeah, that's cool. Is Amy, so she's still performing, right? Steve, she's still racing?
I actually met her. Actually, it was a podcast that I met her on back in 2017. So I haven't heard from her since. I know she has grown children. I believe she's my age, so I believe she's in her mid-50s. So I'd be curious to know what she's up to these days, but I can't imagine it would be too hard to find her.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna look into that because maybe that'd be a good guest. It sounds like it'd be great if we could get her on, the podcast. I'd
I
love to
imagine
talk to her.
I imagine she is still running because it sounds like nothing will stop.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's great, guys. Do you have anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I'm pretty
Nope.
good.
All good.
All right.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, everyone listening, thank you for the continued support. To learn more about co-movement, co-movement.com. And Dr. G, how can listeners learn more about you?
Everything Dr. Stephen G. So at Dr. Stephen G on all the platforms and drstephen.com. So drsteveng.com. And that is I'm about to turn that into a major blog site where we're going to just put tons of content, hopefully 3 to 5 blog posts a week on all the stuff that we talk about, especially the stuff that I talk about on my Instagram reels.
Nice.
Okay. Awesome.
Well,
Great,
looking
guys.
forward to that.
Yes, we'll put the description or the show links in the description there. All right, guys. Till next time. Thank you.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting our sponsors, Native Path Supplements, Lombardi Chiropractic, and A Dog's Day Out Doggy Daycare. They help us bring you 2 new episodes each month and have a special discount just for our listeners. See the show notes for more details. Thank you, and see you next time on the Co-Movement Gym podcast.